My older brother framed me to steal our inheritance. A story of betrayal, justice, and the blood that wasn't thicker than water. The handcuffs clicked shut around my wrists at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, the cold metal biting into my skin as rain lashed against the windows of the Denver Police Department's downtown precinct. I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at the clock on the wall, an analog thing with a cracked face and a second hand that jerked rather than swept, trying to convince myself this was just another nightmare, the kind I'd been having for months since Dad died. But nightmares don't leave bruises where the cuffs dig in. Nightmares don't have the smell of stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. And nightmares definitely don't feature your own brother standing in the corner of the interrogation room, his arms crossed, his face a perfect mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just tell them the truth, little brother," Marcus said, his voice soft, almost soothing. The same voice he'd used when we were kids in Boulder, when he'd convinced me to sneak out after midnight to go cow tipping, or to take the blame when he broke Mom's antique vase. "Tell them you didn't mean to do it, that you were confused. Grief does strange things to people." I stared at him, my mouth dry, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I didn't take anything, Marcus. You know I didn't." The detective, a heavy-set man named Harlow with a mustache that looked like it required its own zip code, slapped a manila folder onto the metal table between us. "We have bank records showing transfers from your father's estate account to an offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands. The routing traces back to your IP address, Ethan, your laptop, your login credentials." "That's impossible." My voice cracked. "I don't even know how to set up an offshore account. I work at a bookstore in Cherry Creek, for God's sake. I barely know how to do my taxes." Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, almost painful. "Ethan, Dad's estate was worth $4.2 million. The ranch in Aspen, the investments, the life insurance, and now almost $2 million is gone. Vanished. The lawyers noticed the discrepancies last week when they were preparing for probate." He turned to Detective Harlow, his expression earnest, wounded. "My brother has been struggling since our father passed. Drinking, gambling. I tried to help him, but..." He trailed off, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge across the table and grab him by his $1,000 collar and shake him until the truth fell out like loose change. But I just sat there, numb, watching my life unravel in a fluorescent-lit room that smelled of desperation. Because here's the thing about Marcus. He'd always been the golden child, the firstborn, the one who'd gone to Stanford Law, who'd clerked for a federal judge in Chicago, who'd come back to Colorado with a corner office in a glass tower on the 16th Street Mall. He was 6 years older than me, and for 6 years, he'd been the standard I could never meet. But I never thought he'd destroy me. 3 months earlier, on a blistering August afternoon, we'd buried our father in the family plot at Fairmount Cemetery. August in Denver is a strange thing. Dry heat that makes the air shimmer. Afternoon thunderstorms that roll down from the Rockies like God's own artillery. Dad had loved it. He'd been a geologist, a man who read landscapes the way other men read newspapers, and he'd always said the weather here kept you honest. The funeral had been small. Dad hadn't been a social man after Mom died 5 years ago. Just me, Marcus, a few colleagues from the Colorado School of Mines, and Sarah Chen, who'd been Dad's neighbor in the Capitol Hill townhouse, and I'd recently learned something more than a friend in his final years. Sarah had found me by the graveside after everyone else had drifted away to their cars. She was in her 60s, elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that couldn't quite hide the kindness in her face. "Your father loved you very much, Ethan," she'd said, pressing a cool hand to my cheek. "Don't ever forget that." I'd nodded, too choked up to speak. Marcus had already gone to the car, checking his phone, no doubt. There was always a deal to close, always a client to placate. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't know for months, was that Dad had changed his will 2 weeks before he died, and that Sarah Chen had been the witness. The holding cell was a concrete box with a metal bench and a toilet that had seen better decades. They kept me there for 48 hours before my arraignment, long enough for the Denver Post to run a headline. "Local bookseller accused of embezzling deceased father's estate." Long enough for my boss at Tattered Cover to leave me 3 voicemails, each one more carefully worded than the last, explaining that they needed to let me go until this sorted itself out. Long enough for my girlfriend Mia to visit me with eyes red from crying and a diamond ring I'd given her 6 months ago, tucked into her palm like a guilty secret. "I can't, Ethan," she whispered through the partition, her voice breaking. "My parents, my job. I just can't be associated with this. I'm sorry." She left the ring on the counter. I didn't pick it up. My public defender was a harried woman named Gloria Vance, who looked like she hadn't slept since the Clinton administration. She met me in an interview room the morning of my arraignment, spreading papers across the table like she was dealing cards in a game I didn't know how to play. "The evidence is not great for us," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "The transfers originated from your father's online banking portal. The login was from your IP address at your apartment in Lodo. Your brother provided emails, supposedly from you, discussing the transfers, talking about investment opportunities, about needing to move fast before probate locks everything up. I never wrote those emails." My hands were shaking. "Gloria, I swear to God I never touched Dad's money. I didn't even know how much he had. We never talked about it." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "Your brother stands to inherit everything if you're convicted. You understand that? The old will split everything 50-50, but the new will—" "There's a new will?" She blinked. "You didn't know?" I shook my head, my mind reeling. "Your father revised his estate plan on August 3rd, Gloria said, her voice dropping. "He left the Aspen Ranch to your brother, but the liquid assets, the investment accounts, the life insurance, the savings, he left to you. $4.2 million, Ethan. Your brother gets the property, you get the cash. But there's a morality clause. If either heir is convicted of a felony, their share reverts to the other." The room seemed to tilt. "Marcus gets everything. If you're convicted of embezzlement, yes, he gets the ranch and the cash." I leaned back in my chair, the pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. The framed emails, the IP address that could be spoofed, the offshore account I'd never heard of. My own brother had built a cage around me, nail by nail, and I'd walked into it without even seeing the bars. My first night in the Denver County Jail, after the arraignment where I'd pleaded not guilty, after the judge had set bail at an impossible $200,000, after Gloria had explained that my brother had reluctantly declined to post it, I lay on a thin mattress and stared at a ceiling stained with watermarks that looked like countries on a map. I thought about Dad. I thought about growing up in that big house in Boulder, with the flatirons looming over us like ancient guardians. Marcus had been 14 when I was born, already distant, already gone in some essential way. He'd left for college when I was in second grade, and he'd come back at holidays with expensive gifts and stories about places I'd never been. Dad and I had been the ones to hike Chautauqua Park on Saturday mornings, the ones to fish the Boulder Creek when the runoff was low, the ones to sit on the porch during summer thunderstorms, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder, betting quarters on how close the strikes would come. Marcus had never been interested in any of it. He'd been too busy, too important, too focused on building the life he thought he deserved. And now he was taking mine. Salvation, when it came, arrived in the form of a woman I'd never expected to see again. Sarah Chen appeared at my bail hearing 3 weeks later, dressed in a navy suit that made her look like a retired Supreme Court justice, accompanied by a lawyer whose briefcase probably cost more than my car. She sat in the gallery while the prosecutor droned on about flight risk and the severity of the charges, and when the judge asked if anyone wished to speak on my behalf, she stood up. "Your Honor, I would like to post Mr. Caldwell's bail," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no in her life. "And I would like to submit an affidavit regarding his father's final wishes." The courtroom erupted. My brother, who had been sitting in the front row looking appropriately somber, went rigid. I saw his jaw clench, his hands tighten on the back of the bench in front of him. Sarah didn't look at him. She looked at me, and she smiled. A small, fierce thing that made me think of my mother. Her house in Cherry Creek was a Victorian masterpiece. All wraparound porches and stained glass and the smell of old books and Earl Grey tea. She made me sit in a leather armchair that had probably been imported from England, and she poured me a cup of tea that was definitely not from a grocery store. "Your father was a good man, Ethan," she said, settling across from me. "But he was not a stupid one. He knew what Marcus was, what he'd become." "You mean a lawyer?" I tried to smile. It felt like a crack in my face. "I mean a man who believes that everything in this world is a transaction. Your father saw it happening over the years. The way Marcus treated people. The way he talked about money at the funeral." She set her cup down with a precise click. "2 weeks before he died, your father came to me. He said he'd been having chest pains. He said he didn't trust the doctors to tell him the truth, and he didn't trust Marcus to do the right thing after he was gone." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. The twin, I realized, of the one Detective Harlow had slapped on the interrogation table. He hired a private investigator, a man named Ross McAllister, based in Colorado Springs. Your father suspected Marcus was, let's say, creatively accounting with some of his clients' funds. He wanted proof before he cut him out of the will entirely. I took the envelope with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Inside were photographs, bank statements, emails, Marcus meeting with men in parking garages, transfers from client escrow accounts to shell companies. A pattern of theft that stretched back 3 years and totaled nearly $1 million. "Dad knew," I whispered. "Dad knew," Sarah confirmed. "And he changed his will to protect you. because he knew that if Marcus got desperate enough, he would come for what he thought was his. She leaned forward, her eyes bright and hard. What your brother didn't know was that your father installed security software on his home network after Marcus helped him set up his online banking. Every login, every transfer, every keystroke was logged and backed up to a cloud server. Including the night of August 29th, when someone using your brother's laptop, registered to his law firm, connected to his home Wi-Fi in the Highlands, transferred $1.8 million to an offshore account. He framed me, I said, the words tasting like ash. He used my name, my information, but he did it from his own computer. He did it from his own computer, Sarah agreed. And your father recorded him doing it. The trial lasted 6 days in the Denver District Court, a stone building on Colfax that had seen a century of Colorado's worst and best moments. The prosecutor, a young woman named Diana Reeves who wore cowboy boots under her suits and didn't tolerate nonsense, built her case with the methodical precision of a watchmaker. Marcus had hired the best defense attorney in the state, a man named Whitfield, who charged $5,000 an hour and had gotten a congressman's son acquitted of vehicular manslaughter. He tried to paint me as a desperate, indebted younger brother, jealous of Marcus's success, willing to destroy the family name for a quick payout. But Gloria Vance, who, it turned out, was a former federal prosecutor who'd moved to public defense after burning out on corporate crime, dismantled him witness by witness. The cybersecurity expert from CU Boulder who traced the spoofed IP address back to Marcus's VPN, the forensic accountant who showed how the offshore account had been opened with Marcus's passport information, the private investigator, Ross McAllister, who testified that Marcus had been under investigation for embezzlement since March. And then, on the 4th day, Sarah Chen took the stand. She told them about the new will, about Dad's fears, about the security software and the recordings. She played the video for the court, a grainy screen capture that showed Marcus's hands on his keyboard, his face illuminated by the monitor's glow as he typed my name into the transfer authorization and smiled. The smile was the worst part. Not cruel, not angry, just satisfied, like he'd finished a crossword puzzle. Marcus didn't look at me when they led him away in handcuffs, his $1,000 suit suddenly looking like a costume, his face gray and old. But I watched him go, and I felt something I didn't expect. Pity. Not forgiveness. Never that. But pity. For a man who had everything and thought he needed more. Who looked at his own brother and saw only an obstacle. I got the money. Not that it mattered in the end. I used some of it to buy a small house in Netherland, up in the mountains where the air is thin and the stars don't compete with city lights. I opened a bookstore, an actual brick-and-mortar place with creaky floors and a cat named Hemingway who sleeps in the window. I hired Gloria Vance as a consultant to help me set up a legal defense fund for people who can't afford to fight false accusations. And every August 3rd, I drive down to Fairmount Cemetery and I sit by Dad's grave and I tell him about the year, the good and the bad. The customers who found exactly the book they needed. The fund's first successful exoneration. A woman in Aurora who'd been framed by her business partner in a scheme that looked almost familiar. I tell him I understand now. That love isn't about the money you leave behind. It's about the trust you place in the people who matter. Dad trusted me to be decent, to be kind, to value the mountains and the thunderstorms and the quiet moments more than the zeros in a bank account. Marcus is serving 8 years in Fremont Correctional Facility. I write to him sometimes. Short letters, updates on the family. He never writes back, but the prison counselor told me he keeps them in a box under his bed. That's something, I suppose. A crack in the wall he built around himself. Maybe one day it'll be wide enough to let the light in. Mia came back once. Showed up at the bookstore in Netherland with her ring in her pocket and tears in her eyes. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd let fear guide her when she should have let love. I was gentle with her. I bought her coffee at the cafe next door, and I told her she didn't need to apologize for protecting herself. That fear is a powerful thing, and she'd been right to be scared. But I also told her that trust, once broken, isn't something you can glue back together. It has to grow back on its own, like a bone knitting after a break, and sometimes it never quite heals straight. We parted as friends, which was more than I'd expected and less than she'd hoped. The Aspen Ranch sold last year to a family from Texas who want to turn it into a retreat center for veterans. I could have kept it. Dad's will left it to me after Marcus's conviction voided his share. But every time I walked those halls, I heard Marcus's voice echoing in the empty rooms. Some places carry too much weight to be homes. I took the proceeds and endowed a scholarship at the Colorado School of Mines in Dad's name. For geology students who want to study the land the way he did, with curiosity and reverence and a sense that the earth has stories to tell if you know how to listen. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to balance the scales of what Marcus tried to do, but it's a start. A small, stubborn act of faith in a world that sometimes feels designed to make cynics of us all. I still have the handcuffs. Not the actual ones. Those went back to the Denver PD, evidence in a case that's long since closed. But I bought a pair at a police surplus store in Aurora, and I keep them in a drawer in my desk at the bookstore. Sometimes, when I'm feeling dramatic, I pull them out and hold them in my hands. I remember the cold metal, the fluorescent lights, the sound of my brother's voice telling me to just tell the truth. And then I put them away, and I go back to shelving books, or helping a customer find the perfect novel, or sitting on my porch with a beer while the sun sets behind the Continental Divide. Because the thing about being framed is that it only works if you let it define you. If you let the person who tried to destroy you become the author of your story. Marcus wrote the first chapter, sure. He set the scene, introduced the conflict, tried to write me into a prison cell and himself into a fortune. But I'm the one writing the ending. And in my story, the innocent don't stay accused, the truth doesn't stay buried, and the mountains, ancient, patient, unimpressed by human greed, keep standing while the storms pass over them. Dad would have liked that. Closing note. Hey there, wonderful readers. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the bonds of family and the weight of truth, then I hope you'll stick around. This channel is all about stories that grab you by the heart and don't let go. Tales of betrayal and redemption, love and loss, the dark moments and the dawn that follows. Life throws handcuffs at all of us one way or another. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're the doubts we carry, the fears that lock us in place. But stories remind us that every lock has a key, and every night eventually ends. If you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Be part of this community. Share your own stories in the comments, because I read every single one, and your words matter more than you know. Good luck out there. Stay honest, stay kind, and never let anyone else write your ending for you. Subscribe, stay tuned, and keep watching.